All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think we have everybody joined with us today. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrological Conditions for August of 2020. I am Megan Shargorodsky, and I'm with the Kentucky Climate Center, and I will be your moderator today. Today we have Stuart Foster, who is the director of the Kentucky Climate Center and the state climatologist for Kentucky, leading the main portion of the webinar. We also have Chip Zimmer with the Kentucky Division of Water, who will be contributing some of the water impacts that we have seen across the state. If you have any questions, please feel free to either type them into the chat box or just hold your question until the end, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask. We are also going to be broadcasting live on YouTube, and I'm going to enable that right now. And so you will be able to look at the archive as well as stream live if you need to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Foster, who will get us started.
Thank you, Megan. And again, welcome everyone to this month's webinar. So as you know, if you've joined us, this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System and Midwest Drought Early Warning System, and reflects the input of many partners across the state. We value those partnerships greatly. Our next webinar will be September 3rd, same time of day. And again, you can, as Megan indicated, you can also see this live streamed on our YouTube channel and the archive there. Just a reminder again that the Kentucky Division of Water, Chip Zimmer's leadership, and the Kentucky Climate Center have partnered in developing and providing the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. And if you haven't downloaded that, please do so. So we value the contributions that people provide across the state on conditions in their areas. So we'll look at recent conditions across the state, take a look at impacts over the last month, and then get into our outlooks going forward here in the latter part of the summer as we start thinking about the fall season ahead. And then we'll summarize that and have time for questions and discussion at the end. So we've got a couple of photographs here from Henderson County. Soybeans, been plenty of rain. Conditions have been pretty good. We'll talk a little bit more about agriculture later. And in the lower left, picture from our site that's reclaimed strip mine area in Breathitt County. And you've got some cattle grazing down in the lower right. Over the last month, we did have a period of a heat wave and some unusually warm conditions that did create some stress for livestock. So we'll kind of highlight that, and also just note on that Breathitt County photograph that station, along with another station there, reflects a partnership with University of Kentucky, and Dr. Chris Barton's efforts there helped to fund a couple mesonet stations through National Science Foundation. So our 30-day rainfall totals. Low areas, driest areas there from around Pulaski County up to Madison County, where we had somewhere in the range of 2.5 to a bit over 3 inches of rain. And then another area that's a little bit drier over in the east, including Lawrence County at 2.9 inches of rain for that 30-day period. So if those are the dry areas for this time of year, that's really not doing too badly all in all. And then we had some areas of the state that were quite wet, some areas along the northern tier that needed some rain, received it over the last 30 days. And then as you look at the western half of the state, and up along the Ohio River area, Webster County, there over 12 inches of rain, and some pretty healthy totals there, 6 to 7 to 8 inches of rain in many areas there. Little dryness down in southern part of Todd County and Logan County, but again, over 3 inches of precipitation for that period. 60-day totals, again, we see the western half of the state with higher amounts, and again, Webster County stands out as the bullseye there with almost 20 inches of rain over a 60-day period. So that's a pretty hefty total for this time of year, averaging about 10 inches a month. And then again, if you get to the eastern half of the state, a little bit drier. Now, early on in the year, if you've been on our previous calls, you may remember that early in the year, it was the southeastern Kentucky that was the wet region of the state. So we kind of flip-flopped a little bit, and it's a little bit drier over in that half. But again, over the last 60 days, those are very reasonable kind of totals, and don't create any major issues with dryness there. And then 90 days going back, again, we've got a couple locations here with over 22 inches of rain in the western part of the state, and a small bullseye there in the eastern part of the state. I think that's Rowan County Station there. If I've got my counties there correct. And otherwise, again, many locations where you're 15 inches or more of precipitation, with a little bit lower amounts in the east. We have you find a few places down southern tier. There's one less than just under 10 inches of rain, again, but that's basically over a 3-month period. So all in all, pretty abundant precipitation totals over most of the state, and particularly wet areas in part of the western portion of the state there south of the Ohio River. If we look at that in terms of precipitation anomalies or percent of normal precipitation, 30, 60, 90-day maps. Again, the yellow to purple shaded colors are areas with 150% to 200% or even more. And so those are the areas that have been extraordinarily wet. And if you look at that in the 30-day map, you can see that area really extends beyond the state of Kentucky up into southern Indiana and Illinois. So there's really a pretty large region there that got abundant precipitation over the last month there. And then on the 60-day period, you can see again that bullseye with over 200 to 300% of normal precipitation there in the western part of Kentucky. And while it's not as prominent on the 90-day map, you still see that there. Otherwise, again, you can see the areas of dryness in pockets of the eastern half of the state. But again, those areas are generally at least 75% of normal precipitation, if not better than that, with just some very, very minor exceptions of areas that just kind of missed out on some of these pop-up storms. As you go back and look over the 90-day period, again, there are hardly any areas at all across Kentucky that are maybe more than about 10% below normal over a 90-day period. So, in reality, it would be difficult to draw a better map for Kentucky looking over the last 3 months in terms of precipitation across the state. Really, nobody is in particularly bad shape, and precipitation has generally been abundant. I put this slide up a few times and keep coming back to it because it's an important part of the story. of what we're seeing here in Kentucky, and not just in Kentucky, but also the surrounding region, that we are in a prolonged wet period. Again, the 24-month standardized precipitation index, if you look at that graph, it shows pretty clearly that we are in the most prolonged wet period in our record going back to 1895. And we've reached a peak intensity of that just recently, or over the last year or so. I anticipate we'll probably do a press release or an announcement at some point, very preliminary, but just looking at some historical data, the National Centers for Environmental Information will be releasing their new climate normals next year for the period 1991 to 2020. So currently we're still running off the 1981 to 2010 normals. But when that happens, I anticipate that most locations across Kentucky will see an increase in the normal annual precipitation of about 3 inches as a result of adding on the 2011 to 2020 period and dropping off the 1981 to 1990 period from those normals. So again, those numbers won't be official until next year, but it looks like at this point we're basically 29 and a half years into that 30-year window. So we'll definitely see a wetter climate here in Kentucky. The temperature departures over the last 30 days, and looking at the maximum temperatures on the left, pretty much near normal where we would expect to be this time of year. The gray shaded areas are plus or minus 1 degree from what would be average, and otherwise would just deviate about a degree or so above or below. And if we look at the minimum temperatures on the right, there we've been a little bit above normal. Again, it's been a wetter climate, a little bit more cloud cover, more moisture in the environment. And so our low temperatures have been averaging generally between 1 and 3 degrees above normal. And again, if we were to look at long-term climate trends for Kentucky, we would see that our average low temperatures in particular have been increasing, and this is very much consistent with that. Soil moisture, modeled soil moisture on the left. We've got a western part of the state. We've got some green indicating that we are a bit above where we would typically be in terms of percentile ranking. So we're in some cases up toward the 90th percentile in terms of soil moisture wetness in the western part of the state. Eastern part right around normal. And if you look at the eastern U.S., and there's really are no large deficits of soil moisture anywhere until you get down to southern half of Georgia and northern part of Florida just a little bit. And then if we look down a little bit more in terms of shallow groundwater, again, same general picture, but we're showing a little more wetness there in terms of some blue shading where we're in the higher percentiles for groundwater. And again, that's consistent with the notion that over the last 90 days, there's really been abundant precipitation just about everywhere in Kentucky. There are a few localized areas otherwise, but again, very consistent with what the precipitation data show. Soil moisture from some of our Kentucky mesonet stations across the state. In the upper left, we're looking at Crittenden County in the lower Ohio River Basin. And we had a little bit of a period there, if we go back into June, where we were drying out. And you can see that in that graph in the upper left. And in the lower left, which is Simpson County down on the Tennessee border, south of Bowling Green. And you see that dry spell, but then again, abundant precipitation or well-spaced precipitation over the last month has really helped that situation out. And so our soil moisture, which was starting to be depleted, has rebounded pretty nicely in those areas. We mentioned, though, that it's been a little bit drier in the eastern part of the state. At the same time, some of those areas have received some very helpful rainfall over the last 30 days. The upper right shows soil moisture from our station located in a valley in Lewis County, again, up along the Ohio River in northeastern Kentucky. Soil moisture levels had dropped off a fair amount through June and have started to recover a bit there more recently. And then in the lower right is Madison County, down around Richmond at the Eastern Kentucky University Farm. And that's one of the areas that we highlighted that has been a bit drier than other parts of the state, kind of stood out as a bullseye. So you can see soil moisture has deteriorated there, and again, kind of still on a downward trend because that area has not received rainfall that some other places have seen. So that might be a plot that is could be considered to be somewhat representative of those small areas of the state where we really have not seen precipitation and kind of missed some of these storms. The evaporative demand drought index over the last week on the left and the last month on the right. So we've enjoyed some extremely pleasant summertime weather. Kind of feels a little bit more like September mornings lately. And with that, those lower high temperatures and lower overnight lows, we see a reduction or a lower level of evaporative demand in the atmosphere. And again, so that's helping to keep that soil moisture in place. Over the last month, again, if you think back to July, we did have a short heat wave there, and with temperatures well into the 90s, approaching the mid 90s, and particularly in the northern part of the state, northeast, and that's evident there again in the evaporative demand index being a little bit higher than normal. But again, there's none of those patterns show anything really dramatic for us. 7-day average stream flows. Most of the streams in the eastern 2/3 of the state are about normal for this time of year. And in the western part of the state where we've had more precipitation, we have a few gauges that are in the above to much above normal for this time of year. But again, no major or even minor flooding issues at this point. 28-day pattern, again, capturing a little bit longer period. We see some of the impacts of the heavy rains that occurred in multiple parts of the state over the last month, including the eastern Kentucky. Generally, stream flows above to much above normal over most of the state when averaged over that 28-day period. So basically through the month of July. And again, current flooding, just mentioned a moment ago, really no issues here in the state whatsoever, flooding. So we can happy to be able to move past that. Now, having said that, there have been, take a look at impacts. Again, a lot of heavy rain events and led to some localized flash flooding that did have significant impacts in some areas, but again, very much localized and not producing any major river flooding whatsoever. So with that, Megan, I'll send it back to you and invite Chip Zimmer with the Division of Water to come in. He serves as our kind of point of contact for Kentucky in terms of contributing to the U.S. Drought Monitor, and I thought we could bring in and gain a little insight from some of the work and challenges he's had over the last month and so forth in terms of contributing to the Drought Monitor.
All right, now we're going to bring on Chip Zimmer.
All right, can you hear me, Megan?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'll start off. This is the current drought monitor for this week that was released on Thursday. Actually, today. Days are getting away from me. So this was released this morning, and you can see there is some D0, D1 in the Ohio Valley still. That was a little bit larger last week. Luckily, we had a lot of rain come through and kind of clear a lot of that out, at least some of that out. Really, you have to go out west. There's some really significant drought out in the Four Corners region, out into the West Coast Pacific states. Also a drought up in the Northeast, which is not a very common thing to see. Up in New England, Maine area, there's some D1, D2 up there. But luckily for our area, while it's been a little dry a couple weeks ago, it's really the last that rain we had over the weekend really helped things out. So not any widespread significant drought in Kentucky in our area. And Megan, can you flip to the next one? All right, this is looking at the 1 month change, and if you look at Kentucky, there really isn't any change other than just a little degradation there where we have a little D0 in the state. This really kind of skips over because we jumped up and had a wider area of D0. Even last week had some D1, and I'll show you that in a minute. But that all happened within a month. So when you look at the change for an entire month, you see absolutely nothing happening in Kentucky. And if you look up, Indiana's had a lot of change, a lot of improvement there across the southern two halves of the state there. And you see out west a lot of degradation in Colorado, Wyoming, and over in the Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada area. And flip to the next one. And here's a quick look at, this is last month. So, or not last month, last week. And this is just looking at where we were at last week. And you can see we had a band of D0 running through from southeastern Kentucky through central Kentucky. And then you had a little area of D1 that went from Scott County into Fayette, Bourbon, and Clark counties, and very tight, narrow band. And then you had in the northeastern part of the state, you had an area of D0 and D1. So drawing lines like this makes it very difficult when we have this type of pattern. Like Stu said, it's been pretty wet across a lot of the state, especially the western part of the state. I know I had a colleague in Bowling Green who was talking about how wet it's been. You know, they're mowing there. They can't keep up with mowing the grass. I live in Scott County. I haven't mowed my yard. I finally mowed my yard. It was the first time I mowed it in over a month. I mean, we just did not get rain where everybody else was getting rain around us. So it makes it very difficult because you have very tight gradients, and we're really seeing a D1 that small. It's really pushing our level of how far down we can get and drawing lines. And it really, even a few years ago, I don't think we could have gotten down to that low of that high resolution. So as technology has improved, we've been able to get in a little deeper, but that's really still pushing about how much, how tight we can get those, or small those areas are. And even with this, I can guarantee you there's some places in that D0 that we're wondering why they're in D0, because they did get a very small convective thunderstorm that popped up on them and it rained on them, but the area around them was dry, and vice versa. There's areas that were in D0 that probably had gotten missed multiple times, but again, it was such a small area, we just don't have the ability to zoom in and drill in on something that small. So, and that's kind of the nature of the beast, and in this part of the country during the summer, because we do get a lot of convective storms where it's kind of hit or miss, and until we get a a big widespread system like we just had and usually at this time of year, usually the only widespread systems we get are tropical systems. So the one we had last week was kind of an oddity to have just a frontal system this time of year do that much widespread rain. But the one thing too is when we're working with the state, we're only looking at the state. So if you look at just Kentucky, you can see up there in Greenup County, you can see there's just a tiny area of D0 and D0 in that blob of D1, and vice versa. There's a little band of D1 running right along the Ohio River in Mason and Bracken counties. Now, if I was just looking at Kentucky, I would have filled in that area of D0 and D1 because it was so small, I would have excluded it. And the same thing, I never would have had that D1 there along the Ohio River. But we don't work inside just a bubble. The drought doesn't stop or begin at a state border. So luckily, we have other states that are doing similar process to what we were. So when I was working on this map last week, I was working with Aaron up in Ohio. And so when I said I wanted to put D1 up in Northeast Kentucky, he said, yeah, that's fine. We have counties here that need D1 as well. But we have this area right over, it's just one county in southern Ohio there where they just kept getting rained on. And so he wanted D0 there, and it spilled over just a little bit into Northeast Kentucky. So instead of sending my map and his map separate to the drought author and then letting them decide where to try to figure out where that line should be, we can go ahead and combine our maps, draw those lines and show that bleed over one way or another. So it helps make for a better map. It also helps for the drought monitor author who's doing the whole nation, not having to worry about little fine details like that because we've already done that for him. So go over to the next slide. All right, that's the last one from me then. Just one thing I'm gonna say is what's really good is in the past couple years, until a couple years ago, I didn't really have communication with Indiana, Ohio. I mean, the main communication I had on a statewide level was Illinois and Missouri. So I was really dependent on National Weather Service offices for the Ohio and Indiana borders. So luckily they've gotten programs started up and really good programs. So it's made it a lot helpful. Unfortunately, West Virginia and Virginia, I'm still working with the Charleston, and I think it's the, I can't even remember the one in Virginia. Their National Weather Service offices, and Blacksburg, that's a Blacksburg office in Virginia. And in Tennessee, I actually have to work with the Southern Regional Climate Center. So I'm working with somebody who's in Baton Rouge and somebody who's in Dallas. So they really don't get that local feel for it, so they're doing the whole region of the country. So, it's good to have somebody to talk to, but it would be great if I had somebody actually in Tennessee who knew what was going on locally. So it's still a challenge, but luckily we have half of the state, we do have good partners in neighboring states. So now I'll flip it back over to Stu.
Thanks, Chip. I really appreciate that. And I wanted you to come on and talk a little bit about the kind of process of putting the drought monitor together, and really kind of honed in on the challenges, but also the improvements that we've seen, the ability to really focus on a much finer scale, finer resolution in terms of looking at drought. So some of you on the call may remember the days, it hasn't been that long ago, when we were looking at droughts, especially back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, when we were looking at climate division statistics. So instead of being able to hone in on small patches of dryness or wet areas at a sub-county level, we were looking at breaking the entire state of Kentucky into only 4 areas or divisions. So we had, for example, the Central Climate Division running from the Tennessee border south of Bowling Green all the way to the Indiana border there at Louisville. And all of that was considered the same in terms of whatever was happening in terms of drought. So it's really a big improvement, but a big challenge for people like Chip that have to work to pull all that information together. But anyway, we made a lot of progress, and the Midwest Drought Early Warning System, I think, deserves a lot of credit, plays a big role certainly in helping us to develop this program, but also the advances that Chip referred to in Ohio and Indiana, I think are very much tied to the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. So moving on, storm impacts over the last month, pretty busy map there with a lot of symbols indicating heavy rains and localized flash flooding and damaging winds. A few hail reports, one from Harrison County that indicated damage to vehicles there. I believe that was on July 12th. And then otherwise, as the text said, just very frequent periods of storms across the state. Again, there's been a lot of moisture in the environment. There's a lot of fuel for thunderstorm development. And we saw numerous heavy downpours. Some of the thunderstorms, again, when you get high winds, you get down trees, sometimes across roads or on buildings or power lines, all good candidates. We had a couple cases of lightning strikes that caused house fires across the state during the month. But otherwise, again, some very heavy rains and localized flash flooding. Megan, I want to go, let's try this next slide. It really kind of captures pretty well. This is our Mesonet station in Webster County. And yeah, if you go ahead and start this, these photographs are taken every half hour. And this was on, I think, was it July 8th, I believe. And they received, boy, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was over 3 inches of rain within 1 hour time. And we looked back at the National Weather Service charts and basically indicated that that was an event that would be expected to occur at any given location less than once every 200 years. But having said that, that's just at any given location. We had several locations across the state that had very heavy rainfall events. This one we were fortunate to be able to capture with our camera there at that site. But this kind of typifies what led to some of the localized flash flooding impacts across the state. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the next slide then. Well, I'll take a quick look at the ag impacts this month, but I want to thank Matt Dixon at the University of Kentucky at the Ag Weather Center there. He's taking a little bit of time away from the office with his family, but he was very kind and went ahead and put together a slide for me to include this month. The main message I think that he had was that all in all, it's up to this point, knock on wood, it's been a pretty good year for agriculture across the state. There was concern at the beginning of last month, and I think we talked about this on our call, our webinar last month, some concern with the heat wave that was at that point forecast for early July, that there could be some issues with dryness and impacts on corn as it got into the silking period, very sensitive period. And there's also concern about heat stress on livestock, particularly cattle and such in the state. So we were very fortunate that while it was hot, we got rain when we needed it in most areas of the state. And so the corn crop came through that silking period all in all pretty well. And if you look at the upper left, you can see that this week in terms of different stages of corn development, as you go down from silking to dent, you're getting farther along in the development process. You can see that the percentages there on the left column are right pretty much on target with the 5-year averages on the right-hand column there, and generally a little bit better than where we were last year. And again, you'll recall last year started out extremely wet, and there was a lot of planting and such that was delayed last year. Otherwise, if you look at soybeans, look at tobacco, again, things are pretty favorable. We are at or a little bit ahead of schedule on the 5-year averages. And in the upper right, if you look at crop conditions, you have the very high percentages that are in the good category. And again, a pretty nice balance between excellent and in some cases corn looking extremely good there all in all. And otherwise conditions for agriculture, you know, they're never going to be perfect, but about as good as you can expect at this point. And again, really appreciate the input and enjoy working with our friends there at University of Kentucky. So taking a look ahead now, the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast got a lot of green in Kentucky, and green is a good thing generally, but in terms of precipitation, it basically means that we're not expecting too much over the next week. So basically about a ½ an inch or less over most of the state. So a little bit below normal. Again, at this point, that's not particularly an issue unless you're in one of those areas of the state that's been a little bit drier than others. But you can see a lot of precipitation expected over the East Coast, and then out a little bit more into the Midwest. And some of those areas are in the Midwest to get into Missouri, Iowa in particular, very much need that precipitation. So we'll be hoping they get it. 6 to 10 day outlook in terms of temperature, expecting a ridge and some warmer than normal temperatures across the Central Plains and to our north. But for most of Kentucky, simply an enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures, pretty much seasonable kind of conditions. So we've enjoyed some pleasant weather over the last few days, and we're going to get back to more typical August conditions over the 6 to 10 day period. And then in terms of precipitation, the western U.S., where we're seeing drought development, those areas have an enhanced likelihood of being drier than normal. And again, associated with a ridging of high pressure kind of dominant over that region. But for us here in the eastern half of the country, we have a slightly enhanced between 40 and 50% likelihood of being above normal precipitation over the next 6 to 10 days. And again, we have a lot of moisture in the environment in general, and much of our summertime precipitation is simply water or moisture that's recycled from evapotranspiration and then comes back down as rainfall. So there's a lot of moisture available to fuel those storms. 8 to 10 day outlook, pretty similar. The heat wave area of ridging and high pressure across the Central Plains and north expected to continue, if not intensify a little bit, and a little larger expansion of the area has an enhanced likelihood of being drier than normal. But again, here in Kentucky, we're generally expect to be around normal to perhaps a little bit above normal in terms of precipitation over that 8 to 14 day outlook. So, you know, we're basically taking us 2/3 of the way through the month with a 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks after we looked at the 7-day precip outlook. So if we go to the next slide, then we're basically taking a look at the month as a whole. And the outlook for August as a whole, we can see on the left in terms of temperature, in that area or part of Kentucky, the western part, is in that area that has an enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures. But again, that reflects more than anything the very pleasant start to August that we've had up to this point. So it appears when you look at the 6 to 10, 8 to 14 day outlook that as temperatures and humidity levels, unfortunately, start to rebound to more seasonable levels, that below normal forecast or outlook is probably off the table. So again, that's for the entire month, but it really reflects the impact of what we've seen here in the first week of August. And then on the right, you can see that for the state as a whole, there's a slightly enhanced likelihood of wetter than normal conditions. That's consistent, not so much with the next 7 days, but with the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlook. But actually, much of the map there, and especially the areas farther east, reflect the outlook that was generated. Again, this is for the entire month before the hurricane. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it exactly right. Headed up the East Coast and brought some torrential rains to that area. So a lot of that above normal precipitation there reflects the impacts of that hurricane, which has already occurred here this month. And the seasonal outlook for the August through October period. So now we're going the late summer into the early part of fall, enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures. And again, we see this very frequently, that a forecast or outlook of above normal temperatures, that's consistent with a changing climate, that our temperatures are increasing and that our climate normals that these are based off of are pretty old now. So again, 1981 to 2010. So there's an inherent bias that all in all, we tend to expect to be above normal in terms of temperature. So we have an enhanced likelihood, generally in the 40 to 50% chance of being warmer than normal over that period. Certainly remember last year when we got into September and got the flash drought and some very, very high temperatures, had numerous days above 90 degrees last year in September. And then on the right-hand side, depending on what part of the state we're in, equal chances to a slightly elevated likelihood of being wetter than normal. Monthly stream flow outlook from our friends at the Ohio River Forecast Center, right around normal, nothing remarkable there. And again, this time of year, we don't have too much concern there. And again, that's reflected in the seasonal flood outlook, where we have pretty much all the reporting gauges in the state have less than a 25% chance of long-range for long-range flood risk. Some areas in southern Indiana and Illinois, the Wabash Basin there, have some slightly higher levels of risk there. And again, think back to the precipitation maps, and that's part of the area that's been wetter than normal. Wildland fire potential outlook, again, below normal here for the month of August. So again, a bit early in the year, it's been wet, no issues yet, but we really are waiting until we get into the fall season and see whether that changes. I did not put up the map for September for this because we'll bring it in next month, but at this point, the September map drops that green off and has us back to around normal. But we'll see whether that changes here before we come out with next month's webinar. So summarizing that, precipitation totals generally have been above normal, western half of Kentucky through the summer. Some pockets of dryness still evident in the eastern half. Soil moisture and groundwater levels have generally been near to above normal across the state. After a cool, pleasant start to August, looking ahead, temperatures are expected to warm to near or above normal, with a slightly enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation over the second half of the month, with very little risk for flood or wildland fire. Meanwhile, the seasonal outlook transitioning into the fall indicates a slightly enhanced likelihood of warmer and wetter conditions relative to normal over much of Kentucky. And again, that would simply be a continuation of the types of patterns that we've been seeing over the last few years. So with that, Megan, I'll send it back to you, and we'll have time to address any questions or comments that people might have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Foster and Chip. Very good presentation. So if anybody that is watching wants to ask a question, feel free to either ask in the chat box or unmute your microphone. And I'll give just a few minutes to let you guys respond. Thank you, Beth. We enjoy providing them as well, so I'm glad that you guys enjoy them too. If there are no questions, we will go ahead and close up. And so our next regularly scheduled webinar will be Thursday, September 3rd. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact any of these contacts here. It appears that we had some trouble getting the YouTube live stream set up, so I am going to just have it uploaded to our YouTube channel later, so you'll be able to look back for a playback if you need any of that. So there's also the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter and the story map that goes along with it. You'll be able to access those if you look at the YouTube channel recording. So with that, thank you guys so much for being here. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you and have a good afternoon.